you saw a conversation a few moments ago about the demands that we stop using fossil fuels. Meanwhile, this week, there's been confirmation that the energy regulator, NERSA, has now granted permission to the first two big solar power projects under the new embedded generation licensing system. Under the new system, if you want to produce up to 100 megawatts of power, you don't need a distribution license from NERSA to produce and distribute the power. In other words, it makes it easier for someone to build and use their own solar and wind power plants. Dom Wills is the CEO of the company SOLA. It's his company that's won these contracts. Dom, good afternoon to you. How easy was the process to actually get this permission?
Yeah, I think NERSA is quite an interesting job, because on the one side, they're in charge of trying to make sure there's not too much bureaucracy in the process. On the other side, they're obviously trying to make sure that they have serious projects making it through. So I wouldn't regard it as being a particularly onerous process, and it probably wasn't on the critical path. There's lots of other things that have to happen at the same time in order to get a project like this over the line. So it took about between 70 and 80 days, and the documents and the requisites that they asked for were documents we would have had to have had in place anyway in order to raise the capital for a project like this. So I think a fair process.
As I understand it, these were the first two projects to go through the system. Between 70 and 90 days, the more projects they do, the quicker their system will get there. Also, the quicker the projects will get at producing all the paperwork.
Yes, I think so. I think as it becomes, I suppose, market standard, what you require in order to get a private project like this over the line, it'll get quicker, everybody will get faster at doing it. There's whole teams of people that are involved in these projects, lawyers and people doing permitting and financing and so on. So it should happen quicker, and it needs to happen quicker as well. If you look at a project like this, even though it's got good scale, it's still energy-wise only going to produce around about 0.5% of what the country needs every year. So it's going quicker. It is going it's going in the right direction, but hopefully, as these processes become easier and quicker to implement, we'll get closer and closer to bridging that energy gap that we've got in South Africa at the moment.
I suppose if someone wants to make anything happen more quickly, you should remove all of the lawyers from the process, Dom. I know you can't really do that. The electricity that you're going to generate, it's in Ditzelobotla in Northwest. It's going to be 200 megawatts all told with all the projects put together. What are you going to use it for?
Yeah, so in this case, obviously our biggest energy consumers in this country are mostly to do with the mines. There's one mine in particular that uses the same amount of power as the whole of Namibia. So, most of our mines, they produce, well, they're the biggest energy users. So in this particular case, it's a company called Tronox Mineral Sands, who've got mining operations around South Africa. And this solar project, coupled with a potential wind project coming, will make an enormous contribution to the electricity. So it's actually for one buyer, but many sites around the country.
So this is where it gets very interesting, because it's relatively easy. I know none of this is simple, Don, but it's relatively easy to set up a solar power plant next to the site that uses the electricity. Now, distributing the power, this is where it gets complicated. Are you going to be using what we, for the moment, still call the Eskom grid to distribute that power? The official phrase is wheel that power through the grid?
Yeah, we will do that mechanism. And it's relatively new, although we've done it before. And it's actually fantastic, because it allows you to use a solar, sort of a perfect solar area, if you want to call it that, to actually develop and build the project. So this is an area that's got great sun, it's got a good grid connection, it's nice and flat, there's no huge environmental issues and so on with putting a plant there. And then obviously, the mining areas need to be where the minerals are, or the industrial areas need to be where it's, easy transport and all the various things that make a good industrial area. So this wheeling framework that Eskom have got in place really allows you to kind of have the best of both worlds. You develop your renewables project in the perfect spot, and you can send it to a place that uses the energy where they don't have to move. And the costs to do that are not prohibitive, so you can still make the deal work, and it still makes economic sense for both parties involved. And it's also one step closer to getting to this model where, the grid is kind of independently owned and run, and people who want to use energy and sell energy, sell it into it as a kind of a marketplace. So this is a very early steps to a kind of a bilateral trade agreement where, the commodity that you're trading is electricity, but but you don't necessarily have to be in the same room in order to make that trade.
Dom, in a way, this is, you know, the beginning of a brave new world of electricity. Well, we hope it is, because we need to get power from somewhere. Is there a big enough profit motive? You don't have to give away any trade secrets, although you can if you like. The reason I ask this is that if there's no profit motive, other people aren't going to do it. Clearly, there is some profits to be made.
I think so. You know, with this game, what I found, you know, with our business is about scale. And you know, we've been in the industry a long time, and when we had this sort of 1 megawatt cap on projects, we just found that extremely restrictive for the private market, and it was very difficult to really swing the dial, both from a profit perspective, but also from a perspective of actually making a difference to the country and making a big energy difference. Converting this to 100 megawatts means that even though the margins are reasonably slim, the scale really helps you, you know, in terms of making the numbers sort of bigger overall. And, you know, the investment that needs to go in over the next sort of 5 or 10 years is probably in the region of 300 billion rand, you know, plus. So I think from that perspective, it's an exciting place to be in, and it also draws in a big part of the industry. So obviously you create jobs, so there's money to be made there. There's lots of businesses that benefit all the way through. Banks are involved. We mentioned, you know, the legal firms. Everybody kind of gets drawn in. So in terms of being a broad-based kind of these projects do affect a lot of different people economically. And yeah, my hope is that many people are able to partake and benefit, I suppose, from this industry growing the way it is.
Dom Wills, thank you very much indeed. CEO of the company SOLA. Interesting field to be in.